This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more.
Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with me, Arthur Parkinson and Sarah Raven, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Sarah about her new book, which is A Year Full of Pots. And I'm not surprised Sarah's written this book because there are 382 pots, I believe, at Perch Hill, all full of inspiration, which is shared with us all. And I've been lucky enough to know the garden at Perch Hill now for quite a while. And it's been really amazing actually seeing how Sarah, Josie and Adam and the garden team have kind of made gorgeous daisy chains of pots throughout all the different areas of the garden. It's been really lovely to notice the growth of the pots. And I've been looking at Sarah's Year Full of Pots book, and as somebody who just gardens mainly in pots, I'm kind of bowled over by the amount of pots in the book and the amount I'm learning. So Sarah, I just wondered if you could tell me what made you want to write about pots as opposed to gardening in the ground.
Yes. Well, I've been definitely inspired by you and Josie, I would say. So I've known Arthur now for 10 or 12 years. And I remember, first of all, going to his garden in Stoke-on-Trent at the Emma Bridgewater ceramics factory. And I walked into the courtyard there, and some of it is in quite sort of functional pots like dustbins and water troughs and things, as well as a massive raised bed in the middle of the courtyard. And so there are two areas. There's a courtyard area, and then out the back of the shop, there's a very much a sort of container garden. And the beauty and the jewel-like quality that Arthur had in his pots was just absolutely staggering, just really incredible. So I felt very inspired by that. And we've grown pots here now for 30 years, for sure. But I tended to have like Cosmos Sonata White or a dahlia or whatever. And I hadn't done so much about combining and thinking carefully about things, almost like a living flower arrangement. But a flower arrangement lasts a week, and the pots last 3 or 4 months, hopefully, sometimes even longer. And so if you get the combinations right, you've got this living, breathing thing of beauty, which just is such a life enhancement. And luckily then when Josie joined us 12, 15 years ago, can't remember now, she is mad about pots. So we then combined my sort of colour understanding and sort of passion. And I've always used this in floristry, this rule of bride, which is the biggest sort of most sumptuous flower that I want to pick in the garden. Bridesmaid, which is the same colour as the bride, who backs her up and doesn't compete with her. And then really all importantly, I think, some colour contrast, which I call a gatecrasher. So bride, bridesmaid, gatecrasher. So the sumptuous flower, the little flower in the same colour, and then colour contrast in the gatecrasher. And in a bunch of flowers, I would do the first two, bride and bridesmaid, would make 3/4 at least. And then just the final quarter would be a sprinkling of the gatecrasher. Anyway, that was one rule that completely underlies the whole garden here. And then Josie taught me this other system. She came from a garden centre background, and when new plants came in, when she was sort of setting them out on the garden centre trolleys, she always thought about their form. And so their form was rather like the bride. It's what she called her thriller. And that was the sort of, wow, look at that. That's the thing that's really going to steal the show. And then with that, she would often put something lighter and airier, almost like a grass, to sort of fill the space between the big, perhaps a little bit blocky flowers, and that's called a thriller. And then, because we have so many big pots here, we also want some tall climbers, even if they're annual climbers, and we call that the pillar. And then also, because quite a lot of our pots are made from aluminium or steel or whatever, they're metal. So you want to hide that a bit and soften it. So we then have the spiller that comes out the side. So overlaying these two rules of the colour combination with form, you get something in a pot that is rather splendid. And we've now been doing this for 12 or 15 years. And so we both, Josie and I, felt that we really wanted to collect all the photographs that we've done with Jonathan Buckley over the years and then collect it into a book, taking you through and showing you that there's something wonderful that you can have to look at, smell, feel, really from January, February, which is the first chapter, right through to November, December, which is the final chapter. So that's rather a long-winded answer, Arthur, why I decided to do it.
But you totally, completely fall down the rabbit hole once you start to flick through this book, because what's in it is a lot of descriptions and combinations of your beloved palettes, the 4 palettes that you fine-tune. Most weeks I'd imagine you're putting new colours into these 4 palettes. The palette 1 is the dark and rich, gorgeous Venetian classic tones that I think a lot of people associate you with. But then we move into the boiled sweet, a little bit of Willy Wonka, and then we've got the most difficult, although I don't think you find it difficult anymore, the soft and warm, which is a more modern palette, but you've made it your own. And then the final is probably more difficult, actually, the soft and cool, which combines blue, which I know you find a bit more tricky than other tones.
Yeah.
And then what I love is you write about mixing the colours, which I think people find really difficult. And there's a most lovely photo of you and these gorgeous jelly top candles.
Yes.
Of you mixing different tones. And the whole book really takes your hand and guides you through that. You don't forget that. And then exactly as you've said with the Josie, the form, the spillers, the thrillers, the hearts and the horizons like we do in the vase.
Yeah.
And then I just love that it takes you... I mean, this book really is a follow-on from, I think, Earful of Flowers, but it's more detail on the recipes. And for me, as someone who gardens in pots, what I found really useful was you've done lists, I think it's page 82, quantities of what to sow, and also you're honest on what to maybe order in as a growing plant, which I found really useful. I mean, I've got a bit better at doing that, but as a beginner gardener, you often sow far too much, and I sow a lot less now because I've learnt from you and Josie that actually you don't cram your pots, you let things grow and fill out, and then everything's more healthy and less stressed if it's competing with one another.
Yeah. Well, I really want it to be like a cookery book in a way, People are intimidated if they don't have the how-to, and I just felt that so strongly, that I've been doing pots for such a long time now, and with so many that I say at the beginning that I've got all this volume of pots, and I say it's not as a boast, it's because I hope that allows you to see that I can speak with some authority about them, just because, each year here, I suppose, between April and May, we maybe get 220-ish, I don't know, something like that, different plants that come in that we're going to trial for containers, whether they be more compact dahlias or whether they be like a fuchsia that you and I talked about recently, like dying embers, or, anyway, and we won't necessarily know them. So it's then putting them together, and that's where the palettes really help us, which is at least if we know what colour it is and what its form is, as well as its size, we can then pretty confidently mix it with others and know pretty confidently what it's going to end up looking like. I mean, we have had many that haven't worked or we didn't think were quite beautiful enough. And of course, they won't have made this book. But yeah, I mean, it is absolutely rammed with photos. I think there's something like 700 photographs. Certainly there's 70 to 80,000 words. So it's quite a tome. But I am really pleased with it. And Bloomsbury published it again, and it's the third one in our series of A Year Full of, following on for A Year Full of Flowers, A Year Full of Veg, and this one, A Year Full of Pots.
And what I'd say about the photos, I love how, and I know you will have taken a long time doing this, as you go from up close like a bee or a butterfly going into these pots, and then you come out and away. And what I think anyone looking through this book will learn is how to stage pots and how to use the garden table and anything really that's a raised platform to create a stage and a drama by using pots. And that's something that I know you love doing all the time. I've been in the van with you
Very
or the
much.
car many a time, and you've suddenly put the brakes on because you've seen an antique shop
Yeah.
or something for sale in someone's garden, or something chucked out by someone's, dustbin saying please take.
Yeah.
And that is how you create so many gorgeous visions at Perch Hill. And it's also about materials, isn't it? We go from terracotta to old water troughs to old sinks and
Yeah.
and new pots, old pots, and that's what I think I like the most about this book. It's not just here's a old water trough because I've got a farm. Anybody who, whether you're in the city or in the countryside, whether you've got a big or small garden, through looking at the photographs, I think you will be inspired. And also what I think's really useful is you go from full-on sun to shade, and you do that very helpfully for anybody.
Oh, good.
Particularly for someone like me. My garden isn't really full sun anymore. So I've learned a lot through reading, particularly the shady bits.
Yeah. No, I think I'm very proud of those bits where, do you know, they were a really last-minute addition. I just suddenly, I found myself making a list of plants that are good in pots for shade, because of course, lots of people have shady gardens. And so I suddenly started thinking, I'm going to do that as a list. And then that got me going. So the poor editor who I work with, Zina Al-Kayat, who's just done such a great job with this book, I rang her up or emailed her saying, do you think we could slot in a section on nice pot plants for scent, nice good container plants for drought, good container plants for pollinators, good container plants for shade, as we talked about. And then finally, the best for the longest flowering. So those who are just so super busy and just want something to start flowering in June and go on flowering till November, there's a section on those. So yeah, I really enjoy doing it because they're really hardworking. I mean, I suppose in a way they're like articles, that you might write for a magazine or whatever, just with lists of the things that have excelled here. But I wanted to make it both, I hope, inspirational with the wonderful Jonathan Buckley pictures, but also really, really practical and hand-holding for beginners and more advanced gardeners alike.
Yeah, it definitely is. I love the fact that you've got, throughout the year, paragraphs on dismantling the pots and then pot toppers and things that, a photo can't tell everything, can it? I think that's the thing with pots. Unlike just, a garden shot, people do need to know, well, how do you get that combination so things aren't crowding each other out, and when do I plant those bulbs underneath that? So, it's hand-holding, brilliant advice. And I love the fact there's so many photos of you gardening as well. I just wish there was one photo of you sitting and enjoying the garden, but never mind.
Oh, good point. I'll do that in the next book, which I'm about to start.
There's a lovely photo of you holding paperwhites, which is very gorgeous and glamorous.
Oh, yes. So, the last thing that I suppose I wanted to highlight was how much I know I've mentioned it, but indebted to you and Josie for the aesthetics and for the practical side of it, which is that the Dutch Yard, which anyone who's been here to Perch Hill, it's on the north face of the house. So traditionally, lots of places that you might see where they've designed their gardens might have perhaps box or even some U-shapes or anyway, sort of topiary to give it form and structure, even in the shade, or perhaps hosted hydrangeas. But Adam, my husband, and a great friend of ours who's a garden designer, Pip Morrison, they said, no, why don't we brick that area and mainly make it over to pots? And because of you and Josie, that I knew both, I had aesthetic inspiration, and I knew with Josie's incredible green fingers and knowledge of horticulture, we could achieve it. And so we now have 72 pots in just that area in the peak of summer. A lot of them, like you say, raised on tables, just knackered old ex-metal cafe tables. And we also have a wellhead there made from brick. And so that raises some things up. And so whether it's when I walk out of the door as narcissus start in March, through tulips in April, into the sort of mid-season things like violas in May, and then on to nemesias in June, and then perhaps sweet peas and even some container roses in July, and of course the beginning of the dahlias, and then on to things like tumbergias, chocolate cosmos, ceterias, verbenas, all those things right the way through, and ipomeas, etc., until our first frost comes. And so taking us well into the winter. And then again, a few things poking up from then on. So like early in the year, we have already little iris poking up, little crocus, but all concentrated in that area is so wonderful. And we do have pots, particularly big pots elsewhere, but it's that, when we created that garden, that's what made me really want to make this book, because we've got shots done by Jonathan all the way through the year of that particular area. So it's the Dutch Yard, you, Josie, Adam and Pip Morrison, who really have inspired this book.
And I love the fact that your favourite thing in the world, the dahlia, you devoted 20 pages to it, I counted. And I just love the fact that they're not the heart of this book, actually, because there's so much accompanying them. But, I think the lovely thing about your pots is, yes, they are to look at, but you can still harvest from them too. I know that's very close to your heart. Yeah. And also the pollinator, creating a wildlife reserve wherever you are, is completely possible by pots. And I love that, you've got a lovely drought-tolerant DPS with buddleias and so many beautiful bee photographs. So this is for all levels, this gardening with pots. And I think that's what's wonderful about this book. It's made it, I think, more accessible than ever, your garden, but you're sharing it with everybody. And that's what I've always loved about your books.
Oh, well, thank you.
So this will be a cherished Bible for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. It is out online, signed by Sarah, for mid-February, so earlier than other places if you want to order it. And I heartily recommend that you do. It's absolutely beautiful. So well done, Sarah, because I know you work very, very hard writing these Bibles for us all to enjoy for years to come.
Oh, thank you, Arthur. Well, it was a lot of work, but a work of a real genuine joy doing it, and working with Jonathan Buckley, the photographer too. So yes, I hope you all enjoy it as much as I have done, both creating the pots and then writing about them and photographing them. Thank you.
We'll all be able to pot away thanks to you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange. Next week, I'm in fact going to be joined by Aret Anderson and Henrik, and I'm really sorry he will laugh because I can't pronounce his surname. It's Swedish. Anyway, they have written the most wonderful book on trees, and I cannot wait for you all to hear them waxing lyrical about not only why we should plant trees, but how to select the right tree for the right place, and the whole ecosystem services thing that there's so much great research about now, and what trees can do for us in a world full of climate change. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.